This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Chof Dalid, and we're holding on the bottom of Chof Gimel Amid Beis at the Mishnah. The Mishnah now is going to go into the discussion of a muad. For the last really 22 daf since the beginning of the Masechta, we've known that there's this entity called a muad. There's something that an ox scores once, it pays half damages. It cores again, and then there comes a point that the ox has to pay nezek shalem. When is that point? So we've already thrown out the terminology that there's a point that the animal's called a muad. It's prone to damage. We saw this all the way back. Daf Beis. And now, based off of that, our sugya begins. I apologize, we have a little bit of a gray box today. I'm not sure why. Hopefully, it will slowly disappear. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Chav Gimel Amid Beis, Eizahu Tam Veizahu Muad. What is a Tam? What is a Muad? Says the Mishnah, Muad, you know what a Muad is? Call any time Sheidu by Shleisha Yamim, that an animal gores 3 days in a row. Literally, Sheidu, it's testified about an animal that 3 consecutive days it performed an act of a negicha, of goring. That's a muad. Vitam, and when is it a tam? Mishayachzer by shleisha yamim. Divri Reb Yehuda. When 3 more days elapse and the animal doesn't gore. So 3 days creates a muad. 3 days after that reverts back to tamus, says Reb Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Oimer, says Rabbi Meir, he disagrees. Muad, what's a muad? Kol sheidu by shleisha pe'amim. Anytime that there are 3 acts, 3 pa'amim that the animal gores. Vitam, what is a tam? Kol, anything explains that Rabbi Meir, kol sheyatinoika sheyud atinoikais mishamshimin by ve'ina nogeach, that the children can play with such an animal and it will not gore. I apologize, already having some video issues over here. But says the Mishnah, we highlighted a fundamental difference between the Tanakama, Rabbi Yehuda, and the Rabbi Meir, which is what? The difference being, is it yamim or is it pa'amim? If it's yamim, says Rabbi Yehuda, then 3 days in which the animal does not gore, it reverts back to Tammuz. If it's Pa'amim, says Remeir, then what's Tammuz? If the children could play with such an animal without inciting the animal to do damage. And from here begins the Gemara. No, okay, I thought the video was back, but it is not. Begins the Gemara, my time with Rav Yehuda. Where does Rav Yehuda get his din? That it's a din in Yamim. Amar Abaye, says the pasuk. Tamol. This is the original pasuk. Vimsharnaga chumitvol shilsham vuod v'balav leishvenu v'ameis isha hashar yisakel v'abayilav v'gam abayilav you must. So it says the Baye, we're darshing the word mitimol. For the fact that the pasuk says tamol, that teaches us one time chad. Mitimol, trey. Sholsham, mitimol is trey. Sholsham is, Sholsham is tlasa. Sholsham means before yesterday is 3. So from the Psukim, Rav Yehuda teaches us that it is the 4th time that the animal owner pays in Nezek Shalem, and that is where Rav Yehuda has his source, that it's 3 yomim that is testified the animal gores, and then the subsequent next Yom would pay Nezek Shalem. Source number 1 of Rav Yehuda from Abaye. Rav Amar, source number 2, Timol mitomol chat. No, from the fact that the pasuk says, we could have said Timol, and it says mitomol, says Rava, we only learn out 1. But however, Shel Shaimish Trey V'Leishmeranu Ha'idna Chayiv. And then today on the 3rd day, there is a chiyuv. So again, what's going on over here is we know in the Mishnah, and again, I apologize for the video issues. We know in the Mishnah that Rav Yehuda says it's a din in Yamim, but we do not know. Is it the third day that creates the animal being a muad, and on day number 4 it pays nazik shalim, or is it on day number 3 already it pays nazik shalim? And that's going to be at the root of the machlekes Abaye and Rava, based upon how they are darshaning the psukim. Abaye is going to say it's on day number 4, and Rava is going to say already on day number 3. This is all in Shitas Rav Yehuda, that it's a din in Yom. Ask the Gemara of Rameir my time. Where does Rameir get his din that it's not a din in Yom, it's a din in Pa'amim? Titania, we learned in our Braisa. Omar Rebbe Meir. Says Rameir, as we turn over the Chav Dalet Amid Aleph. Rechog Nigi Chaisav Chayiv. Kirav Lini Chaisav like Kol Shekin. Says Rameir, I'll tell you a svara. If the acts of goring are not in complete succession, if they're not one after another, and yet, what's the halacha? There is an obligation. I should say better. It's one after another, but on 3 separate days, not on one day. There's a chiyuv. Says Rameir, certainly if it's kirav negi chaysav, certainly if it all happens simultaneously, then certainly this should create into a muad. So Amrulei, the Chacham responds to Rameir, I'll tell you that your logic is faulty. Because Zava toichiach. Where do we see from Zava? Sharicha ka riyoisa temeya. If a Zava has 3 riyos, 3 emissions one day after next, she becomes a Zava Gedayla. However, Kirva riyoisa tahira, if she has them on one day, does not create her into being a Zava. So says the Chacham to Rameir, even though maybe Savara logic would dictate that with regard to the danger of this animal, maybe with Savara we would think if it gores 3 days in a row, it should be a problem. But say the Chachamim, we see from Zava not that way. Amr Lehen, Rameir responds, Hareyu Oimer, you can't ask me from Zava. You know why? He says Rameir, and Davka by Zava Tala Akasav as Azav Biriyaisav. The Torah depends upon the acts of seeing. Vesazava biyamim. So says Rameir, no, there's a Zav and a Zava. Says Rameir, by a Zav I'm right. It has to do with the Riyais, even if they're not on separate days. By Zava, you're right. It has to do with Yamim. But Rameir basically holds his own. That don't ask me from Zava. So the Gemara retorts back, and the Gemara says, "Mimai dahai v'zois lemute Zava miriyos." How do you, Rameir, know that v'zois, and this teaches me that by a Zav it has to do with Riyos, and by a Zava Yamim. Ema, maybe ask the Gemara the opposite. Lemute zav miyamim. Amar Kra, says the Torah of Azav es zayvayil is zachar l'nekeva. Makish zachar l'nekeva. Again, zachar, a male, has the dinim of zav, female has the dinim of zava. And what's the hekish? Man nekeva, says the Gemara biyamim of zachar biyamim. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? But flip it around the other way. V'lekish nekeva is zachar. We should equate a nekeva to a zachar. That what? Ma zachar briyos have nekeva briyos. Answers the Gemara birachman of his zais. And now the Gemara asks the classical kasha, Umar Rais, how do you know? We have a mir in one, and we have a riboy in the other. Rameir is trying to say that when it comes to zav, it has to do with riyos. When it comes to zav, it has to do with yamim. The Gemara is trying to figure out, where do you know the word vizais comes to teach us? Says the Gemara, we have a hekish, but bottom line, how do we know which is which? Explains the Gemara finally, Mistavra, this comes from logic, from Svara. Kai b'riyos, v'mayid riyos. Kai b'riyos, v'mayid yamim. It doesn't make sense. Ever since the Torah is talking about riyos, therefore it's v'mayid riyos and not being v'mayid yamim. That is the drasha of Rameir, and that's our basic machlekes Rameir and the Chachamim. Rameir saying it has to all do with the pa'amim that animal gores, Whereas Rav Yehuda is saying, no, it has to do with the Yamim. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara. We're about 13 lines down. The first one in line is Yamim. Tanu Rabbanan Ezehu Buad. We have a brisa that explains very similar to our Mishnah. What is a muad? Kol she'idu bai. Anytime they testify, shloisha yamim v'tam. But what's a tam? Now this is where you're going to see it's a little bit different than our Mishnah. The kids can play with him and on a gertiv Rav Yosi. So Rav Yosi, just to equate it back to our Mishnah, is really half and half. He's going with yamim, similar to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. But when it comes to tam, he's going with the opinion of Rav Meir. It has to do with the kids playing with it. That's Rav Yosi. Rav Shimon Aimer Hafach. Muad is kol sheidu shapamim, like Rav Meir. But v'loimer shayamim al chayzel belvad, like Rav Yehuda. So Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Abba, Ada Barava halacha, ki Rav Yehuda ben Muad. He wants to pasuk like Rav Yehuda, that it all has to do with days. Why? Sure, Yosef Maidelai. Because Rav Yosi holds like Rav Yehuda. But on the flip side, Valacha Kirameir, and this is what we saw in the Bryce that we just said, that it's half and half. We're pasuk like Rav Meir, Bitam, sure, Rav Yosi Maidelai. So we're really pasuk like Rav Yosi, which by Muad goes with Rav Yehuda, which by Tam goes with Rav Meir. So Amrli Rava responds back to Rav Nachman. How do you know halacha ki Rav Yosi? Maybe halacha ki Rav Meir ben Muad Rav Shimon Maidelai. Halacha ki Rav Yehuda b'tam Rav Shimon Maidelai. Why are we saying that we pass the way that you just said? Because Rav Yosi is Maideh. Why don't we say the other shita like Rav Shimon is Maideh? Amar lei ani ano Rav Yosi spherely. Why are we passing like Rav Yosi, a concept that we see many times throughout Shas? To Rav Yosi nemuka imai. Rav Yosi has the nimuk, has the reasons with him, and therefore we side with Rav Yosi, and that, says the Gemara, is the psak halacha. Continues the Gemara about 15 lines from the bottom. First one line is Rav Yosi ibayilahu with a new shayla. Ask the Gemara yamim dekatani, according to the opinion of Rav Yehuda, that all has to do with 3 days. Liyudei Tura or Liyudei Gavra. What are the 3 days? What are the 3 testimonies coming to teach us? Is it coming to teach us that after 3 days, the Torah, the ox becomes a muad? Or the owner becomes a muad, meaning that he owns such an ox, he has to pay nezek shalim. L'may nafka mina, says the Gemara. If we have 3 groups of Eidim that come on the same day, so what's the nafkamina? Spells out the Gemara. If we're saying that it's testifying on the ox, so then I don't care that all the testimony came the same day. Ma'isa, now we have 3 testimonies about an ox that it will cord, so that ox becomes a muad. But if you're going to tell me no, it's testifying about the owner, why not? Because the owner could say, only right now I knew about it, and only right now do I have the opportunity to watch my animal. But prior I did not, and therefore it says the Gemara, it would not be a mud. So what is the testimony about an animal that it gores? Is it a testimony about the animal, or is it a testimony about the Bailam? Tashima, the Gemara tries to prove. 14 lines on the bottom. First word on line is Ein. Ein ashar nasemuad. Ad she'idu ba b'fnei bailim. Ashar does not become a muad till this testimony in front of the owners b'fnei bezdin. Hidu ba b'fnei bezdin. V'shalai b'fnei bailim, or b'fnei bailim and shalai b'fnei bezdin. Einai nasemuad ad. Reiterates the brisa. She'idu ba b'fnei bezdin. Ubefnei bailim. Part A of the brisa. Continues the brisa. He do a shnayim barishayna, shnayim bishniya, ushnayim bishlishes. We have 3 sets of eidim testifying about 3 different occurrences. Arikan shalosh eduyos. This is 3 separate eduyos. Vehein edus achas lahazama. With regard to hazama, which means that someone else says, how can you testify about that which you're testifying? You were with us on that date. Says the Gemara. So now what happens? Nimsa iskat rishayna zay memes. Hare Everyone's potter never came to obligation on Nezik Shalim. So they're all going to be potter from Nezik Shalim. Names are Kat Shniya. The second group is found to be Zaymemes again. Nachmal Arikane Aidos Achas. Who potter from Peturim. But names are Kat Shalish Zaymemes. So there were 3 Eduyos that this person's animal guard. And then we find out that the third group was not a valid Eidim. They weren't actually there. Kolon Chayavim. They all have to pay Nezik Shalim. Valzen Emar. And on this third group of Eidim, we say Vasisem Loi Kasher Zaman V'Goymer, that the third set of Eidim have to pay Nezik Shalim, which is the unique halacha of Eidim Zaymimin, is that the Eidim are obligated to pay that which they tried to make the person obligated. So in this case, since the third cat tried to create the owner to be, or the owner of the animal, which we're about to see, to be a moon and pay Nezik Shalim, therefore, the Eidim themselves has to pay Nezik Shalim. Says the Gemara in the last line of Chav Aleph and Aleph, I Amr Leyudei Tura Shapir. So if you're going to tell me that what is the Eidos of an ox that gored, it's that the ox Leyudei Tura, the ox itself has a Shemuad, then it's understandable. However, as we turn off the Chav Aleph and Beis, Amr Leyudei Gavra, for taking testimony about the mention about the owner, Leimer Hanakamoi Anan Miaviyadina Devasal Shashiyamim Asu Hani Miadile. The other person could claim, how was I supposed to know? You're telling me now that it's been Nezik Shalem, but how was I to know that at a later date there's going to be more testimony about this owner? So there's no way I could have prevented it. Therefore, why would I pay Nezik Shalem? Says the Gemara in a similar vein, Amar Ravashi Amrita L'Shemaita Kamid Rav Kahana V'Amar Ali. And he said to me as follows, 6 lines down, Chav Dalid, Amid Beis, if the 3 days are there to make the aksamud, does that make sense? A similar kasha. Let the later witnesses, the third group say, Anon, Manaya Dinan de Kol, the Koi Beidina Lasude Betura Kasi. How was I to know that this act gored prior, that now you're going to try me, that I have to pay Nezik Shalim because the ox gored before I got on the scene? I was coming to give a simple testimony that such a person is obligated to Chatzi Nezek. Why? Because I saw him gore, but I didn't know any prior history, so how could I? The third set of Eidim be obligated Nezik Shalim if I didn't know what was going on. Says the Gemara, unique Kimta, 8 lines down, Chav Dalam and Beis. The Kamar is Ramuze. The case is one of such that the first Eidim hinted to the latter Eidim that they already testified, and therefore he didn't know that he was testifying about an animal becoming a Muad. Ravashi Amar, a second Teretz. The case is referring to in which they came one after another and they seemingly knew what was going on prior. Ravina Amar b'makirin Bali Shar v'makirin es Ashar. They recognize the Baal Ashar, so they know what's going on over here. They know that they're saying testimony about him as a person. He's have to be Nezik Shalim, but they don't recognize the ox per se. Says the Gemara. 1 second. If they don't recognize the ox, then how can they give Edus that he's a muad? Says the Gemara, because he tells the owner, we know one of your animals is prone to damage. We don't know which one of them is. And therefore, therefore you should have watched the entire herd. And that's going to be the Eidos that the Brisa is referring to. Continues the Gemara, a new Shaila. A new Shaila that at first glance seems to have nothing to do with our discussion, but as we'll see in a moment, it's going to circle back around to our Mishnah. Ibayilahu asked the Gemara about 15 lines down. First one line is Hamishasa. Hamishasa kalbo shachavero bichavero mau. Someone incites the dog of his friend to go and damage a different party. So again, Reuven incites Shimon's dog to go damage Levi. Mau. Mishasa vade potter, the one that did the act is potter because it's not his animal. Bal Kelev Mai, what about the owner of the dog? Me, Amrina, do we say Matzi Amrla? He could say, what do you have to do with me? I didn't do anything wrong. You knew that your dog could potentially do such. You should have watched it better. So what is the status in this case? So Amar Rav Zeira Tashiman. Of course, this is what it has to do back from our Mishnah. It says Rav Zeira. Our Mishnah says every time Shidduch is Mishamshim that if the kids play with the animal doesn't gore. That's a sign that it's a docile, it's a tam. What's the obvious dia gonna chayiv? Due to the fact that the kids played with the animal starts damaging. Then what? Then it's obligated. So what do we see? You're seemingly going to be chayiv. Amar Abaye, what are you talking about? Mikatani nagach? Chayiv! Just says you're obligated. Dilma had nagach. Lo yahavi tam. But maybe the way to learn this is that it would still be a tam. You'll just be obligated. And that negicha you won't be chayiv, but it's just showing us that it won't be a tam. Tashima, the Gemara continues to prove from a brisa. She said, "Boy, kelev." She said, "Boy, nachash potter, my love potter mishase b'chayiv ala kelev." Loi says the Gemara, "Ima potter af mishase." They're all potter. Amar Rava imtim slaimar mishase kelboy shachavira b'chaviroi chayiv. So says Rava, 1 second. If you want to take the opposite point, the opposite side of the coin, and say that they're chayiv, then says Rava, Shisahu ba'atzmai potter. What if one incites the animal and it backfires and it damages himself? Potter, my timer. Call him Mishane. Potter. You did something strange. You tried to be Mishas to the animal, incite the animal. Then the animal jumped back at you. Another strange animal action. Vishina boy, the Allah is Potter. I have a raya to you. Damer Eish Lakish, Tei Paras, which is a Rabbim. Achaz Revutzam. We had this a few days ago. One is squatting. Vachaz Melech, one is walking. Ubata Melech has Verevutza. The one walking kicked one squatting. Says the Braisa Petura. Ravutza Meleches, then Chayaves. Amar Le, Anabahi, Chayuva Machavina, the Amar Le, you know you're Chayiv. It's true, you have rishus to walk. Does that mean you have your rishus for the animal to start kicking things? That's the reason why there would not be a chiv in such a case. We'll stop over here and we'll pick it up in the Mishnah the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.